Hi, welcome to another episode of Who What I Don't Know. I'm here with my mother Julie and my brother Brigham, and we just got done watching the documentary Christspiracy. So, Brigham, what are your first thoughts after having just finished watching it for the first time?
Initially, my thoughts on it are very, very, very big. My feelings and my thoughts are very big because it the documentary itself is asking me to think about who I am, what kind of person I want to be, and how I contribute into the machine we live in today. You know, do I? Yeah, it's just like all the big questions again. But one thing I really loved about the documentary is that it seemed very unbiased. Very in the search of truth and whatever that truth is. It's not religion based or politics or anything. It's all about compassion for life.
Yeah, I agree that it did seem that they were pretty unbiased. They didn't stop at asking the first few people. They continued asking questions.
Sorry, one more thing. I thought it was pretty funny in the beginning of the documentary. They started, they would go to different places. One of the places they went to was like a buffet.
Yeah, it was Noah's Ark buffet.
Noah's Ark buffet, yeah. And they had this really big question. I don't remember what they asked him, but I thought it was pretty funny. They just went to the server who worked at the buffet. I wondered why they didn't talk to the CEO of the place. But I think it still makes sense because they got started somewhere, and they just went down that rabbit hole for as long as it took them.
Yeah, and it took them around the world.
Yeah.
So what are your initial thoughts?
So it's conflicting, right?
Yeah.
It makes you question a lot of things, especially about maybe how you grew up or what you know or what you even ate.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot. So, and they interviewed all types of religious people, pastors, rabbis.
And even theologists, different academics, ranchers.
Yep, and even that little girl that didn't want to eat cows or chickens or pigs because she thought they were nice, and she was crying about it, and that stuck out. And
I feel like often in society we always giggle at the humanity that's in our children rather than take it as bits of knowledge that we've lost in ourselves. So a thing that struck me was the similarities between the Western factory farming and even kosher and halal practices. That was quite eye-opening because even though they may be in smaller scale and different as systems of husbandry and creating animals for consumption, or not creating, but you know what I'm trying to say, processing animals for consumption. It was they had a lot of similarities in kind of the worst ways.
It was like each of these companies or businesses, or whatever you want to call them, that were trying to go a more humane direction, at the end of their operation, at the end of each day, they were killing animals for the purpose of consumption.
Yeah.
And
the animals
to be consumed, bought, and sold.
And they didn't have a quality of life. In any of the situation, they were crammed and covered in filth and unhealthy conditions in each of the situations, unfortunately.
it was really striking to see that, because I was reminded so much of why I chose to be vegan the past, like 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. I decided to become vegan. The past few months of this year, I haven't been vegan for personal reasons. Basically, just boiled down to it was to I started to question a lot of stuff, and I felt like I needed, just for a little bit, even to go back to my diet I had before. But this documentary, all at once again, it reminded me of why I initially had chosen to become vegan that time, you know? And even if I don't go back to being full vegan, a vegetarian is certainly a step in the right direction.
Yeah. And on in what you were saying, like in watching this movie for me, it kind of reminded me slash put it in my face that convenience isn't a good enough reason not to be vegan or vegetarian if that's where your heart lies. You know, like when they were interviewing the Buddhist monk, and he was saying like, yeah, traditionally we're like stay away from meat, but if you go to someone's house and they've cooked you a meal, like I would eat the meat that they provided and such. And even different yogis were saying that they help even prepare the meat for places that they go eat when they're invited and stuff. And then the interviewee or the interviewer asked, okay, well, what if that had been like a dog? And then everyone got uncomfortable and like obviously we wouldn't eat that. But depending on where you are in the world, like the line between eat and friend, like differs, you know, and it just reminded me that convenience is not a good enough reason not to be vegan, especially for all the conditions that these animals, no matter the breed, are in prior to being processed.
Right, and they did mention the 21-day Daniel fast, where you basically just eat from a list of foods that they believed that Daniel in the Bible would eat, where he just ate grains and anything that came from a seed, plants or apples or berries or any types of foods like that. And in that Daniel fast, they do allow people to use honey as a sweetener, where like with vegans, they don't usually use anything derived from animals, so not even honey. So there are some different ways of finding a place to start if you want to not have meat as part of your diet. So I like the Daniel fast just because it is only for 21 days, and then you can take a break and eat some of the stuff that you might be missing, and then you can go ahead and do it for another 21 days. And then sometimes, during that small amount of time that you have every month, you may find that you don't even miss it as much, or you don't really want it as much, or you do get your fill, and then you kind of want to go back to being more plant forward is what I like to call. So I'm not like a true vegetarian or a true vegan, but I like to call myself plant forward because I want to think about eating plants before I eat anything else.
Yeah. And I think it's crazy that the basis of the documentary was so controversial, even though truly it's only saying, hey, Jesus was a vegetarian, probably even vegan, and that's all they're saying. And the people producing the documentary were followed by drones, by stalkers, they had to hire a private investigator for their own safety during the process of collecting all these interviews.
They were by the end. So they said that they were filming this documentary and making it for the past 7 years, and by the end of those 7 years, they were being looked at as a threat to big corporations like American agriculture, and people who are very much in the American food industry. This is a threat to the way they make money, and they were being followed day and night.
And that struck me too, because, imagine if you were just working on a documentary, just gathering information, and you have that sense of somebody following you. That's not fun under any circumstance, but, like, how does the threat of what we eat or our food system in society, like, where do we draw a line on what becomes a threat?
Seriously, even back in Jesus' time, how the story of him getting upset at the temple and calling it a den of thieves was mistranslated, and he actually called them a den of violent people because they were slaughtering animals. He was more upset about the treatment of the animals than the money being circulated around it. But 4 days later is when he was crucified, and it's insane how much of a threat to society it was back then, and now even these people creating the interview were threatened by society carrying the same violent values. But like, why has it been like this for 2,000 years, and why are people still so, like, they get so caught up and about their connection to wanting to eat meat and consume meat? Like, why? Like, what is it about the consumption of another living being that causes one to, like, get so upset about the possibility of someone choosing not to do that?
Are you asking?
I guess it is kind of a hypothetical question, but, like, I guess, what are your thoughts?
Well, they talked a lot about the energy, like, I guess the energy of our flesh, the energy of our bodies, and that energy circulates through your body, through all of you as you're living, and whatever way you die is the energy that was circulating through your body at the time of death. And then when that flesh is consumed by another being, when we eat another animal, we're eating that flesh that was in a state of very, very chaotic fight or flight, very much like the animal was in a panic at the face of death, and
they died in
death
violent
at
manners.
that. And spiritually, that is, something you can't look. That's something you can't look past. You can't ignore. Understanding what the animal was going through at the time of death, and then you partake of that. Obviously, I had mentioned about my past as a vegan, and then recently I'm not vegan anymore. I'm eating meat every day, to be honest, and I'm really glad that this documentary, it was kind of like, it rattled me, and if you watch it, I think that's its purpose. We need things in life that rattle us, that cause us to really take a step back and ask if you're doing the best, if you're doing right by yourself, if you're still becoming the kind of person you want to be. And I'm really glad that this documentary did that for me again.
Yeah, honestly, I feel as though some people in America / the West, whatever, they know the conditions of factory farming, but it's just something that's we put to the back of our minds and ignore. And it's a privilege to ignore something that, honestly, catastrophic if you think about it. And people ignore it to remain in bubbles of comfort or distraction, whatever you call it. But what this reminded me of is that there's importance in understanding someone else's experience and sadness, and there's beauty in the sadness. Like, if the essence of the universe is love, you know, our distance from that with different like speckles of sadness throughout, um, like little glimmers of love in the sadness is like looking at like a galaxy from Earth and looking at the stars. You know, like there's beauty in sadness, and people are so wound up in wanting to be happy, and that need is like keeps us in an energy of lack, and then we consume more to try and fulfill us. But what you were saying about the meat it being kind of low energy and just keeping us low, like it's a cycle of hurting ourselves rather than actually helping ourselves.
Because what we consume does matter, whether it's the food we eat or, you know, what we read or entertain ourselves with. I mean, they all have a purpose, and sometimes they want to tell us what our purpose is. And it's important that we find out for ourselves. Like, you know, it does make you think about, when you watch this documentary, about what you consume. And they are talking literally food, because you're saying an animal died, and then it died in a state of tragedy and panic and self-preservation, and then you're trying to consume all of that panic and sadness and its desire to live instead of die. And, you know, it does have an energy that affects you. So I've just found, like, you know, for myself, I need to be more grateful for whatever food I do have, but I also need to choose foods that are more whole foods, and choose the plants and that kind of stuff first. That's what I mean by plant forward from before. And for me, that helps because I did read this quote said that supermarkets are producing or they're selling food products, but they're not necessarily food. And if you really think about, like, opening up a bag of Doritos or any kind of chips, you know, sometimes it's made with certain type of corn products and seasonings and put in such a way that it's crispy and enjoyable and all that stuff, and it makes you want to consume more, but it's not necessarily like a whole food. It's not something that can sustain you long term, and it's, you know, it's just not as enjoyable to eat products that they decide that we should be able to eat, like whether they're saying that we should only eat sweets for breakfast, but rather, you know, if you don't eat something sweet for breakfast but you eat something more savory, it might last longer, it might be better for you. Like, you have to come to these ideas yourself. You have to kind of experiment and see kind of what works for you. For some people, eating a heavier protein breakfast actually helps them with their anxiety for the day, and you know, with other people, they need to eat less breakfast and maybe only just have something, you know, super simple. Like, you all have to kind of experiment and see what works for you. But the whole point of watching this documentary was to get you thinking about what you consume and what you eat and how it's handled before it reaches your table. And that's something that we don't have to do anymore. You know, it used to be that people would have their own farm, they would handle their own food before it reaches their table. They knew where it came from, they knew where the vegetables were grown in their garden, where it came from before it reached their table. You know, this whole farm to table, it doesn't really happen. We go to the grocery store, the supermarket, we buy what we need, and then we come home. So we're not involved in the process. But that's one thing they said, that just because you're not involved in the process of killing an animal doesn't excuse you from understanding this information or understanding what that animal was experiencing before you consumed it.
Yeah, and even in major grocery stores, not even Doritos, but the rise in use of pesticides and other chemicals in even just produce has risen so much to keep up with the demand of people solely using grocery stores to like fulfill themselves. And so we're getting lesser quality but more quantity, and lesser quality of life for the animals that are being slaughtered for our consumption as well. And also what you were saying about learning different ways to nurture yourself, even just for breakfast. Like this documentary also begs the question of like, where does your information come from, and why has that information been given to you? And we need to, like, no matter what people may tell us is right or to do, we need to learn and understand ourselves and what's best for ourselves, because we are connected to the earth. Like, we're literally earthlings, biologically, energetically, whatever. And if we neglect ourselves, then we will like inherently ignore and distract ourselves from these larger issues. And these larger issues are all systemic, so there's no one individual to blame. But as individuals, if we all nurture ourselves in the way that we need to, then these larger societal problems will start disintegrating and becoming less and less issues, because no, I'm actually not going to eat a sausage bagel. I'm going to just have an apple and some oatmeal for breakfast, and then the demand for meat goes down, and then the demand for quality produce goes up, and people start even having their own vegetable gardens again and such like that. And so helping ourselves is what helps each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this documentary, it reminded me that whatever effort I can put into being plant forward, as my mom so often puts it, always is worth it. And it reminded me that I can do this. I can be a part of this movement. You know, I don't have to go back to being vegan today. I don't have to disrupt my lifestyle, my routine so much to the point that it makes me uncomfortable. Whatever I'm doing, whatever effort I am putting towards it is worth it. They went in the documentary themselves. They went to this I don't want to say religious, but there was like, maybe it was religious.
Are you talking about the animal sacrifice ceremony?
Like,
it was like a large ceremony. There was a lot of people
of the Hindu traditions that were taking animals to a temple. Thank you. Taking animals to a temple to be sacrificed, as this tradition called for, and they were able to save one little sheep from. They saved one sheep,
lamb.
a lamb from that.
It's a baby.
From that whole event, and that's worth it. They were able to save a life by going in there, and basically as spies to get information out to the masses, out to us, about one example that happens all around the world every day of animals being killed for money.
Yeah, it's a lot to digest. And when it was honestly a super heartfelt and cute moment when they rescued the lamb, because the rescuers were saying yay, and then the lamb like back.
he was saying it with them.
He was saying yay.
Yeah.
And he knew he was alive.
In unison. In unison, the lamb responded with the people to say yay. That was awesome.
Yeah, and I'm glad it worked out for that instance with the lamb. And it's sad with another woman that is met later in the documentary, who rescued 3 turkeys from a farm in Utah. She was she was facing 2 different felonies, and she was being called a terrorist by the courts for saving these 3 turkeys. And it's insane where like the values of of like the leadership in society and government systems lie. You know, and I think fear is what kind of also pushes people back, like, okay, I don't need to get involved in that. I need to just do my job, keep my family safe, and not get a felony on my belt.
Yeah, you mentioned the comfort. The comfort of knowing that because I have a job, I can go to the grocery store anytime I want to buy food and survive. Because we still so often just forget that, you know, if we don't, it's almost like we know this, but we forget it, that if we don't eat food, we'll die.
Yeah.
But I think we either take it too far. Maybe I'm just speaking personally here, but you won't, like, I think what I really want to say is that, you know, it gives us a sense of comfort because we haven't faced our anxieties about not being part of that system. You know, what would your life be like if you had no way to get food right now when you wanted it? What if you were forced to learn the principle of patience because you didn't have a way to get food right now? You know, it's not good to be forced to learn things like that. You want to choose it, but it's still you know, something that at large has been forgotten. We no longer know how to be patient. We no longer know how to be compassionate towards you know, all living beings, all of life. And so, you know, I think that's what I want to say. You know, facing the fear itself will help you become a better person.
Honestly, and our fear of even a fear of like being fired, or a fear of not having financial stability, and so therefore not having food security, you know, that fear is still for us on so much of a lesser scale than the fear that the animals in slaughterhouses worldwide feel like for their entire lives. You know, and it's sad that we distance ourselves from that reality because it's too much to handle, but us just ignoring it and going about our day is upkeeping those systems. You know?
Yeah, I don't want to take away any of your comments, Mom.
Oh no, you're fine.
Just one other thing is that everything about the world we live in today, everything, you know, all the reasons why through history words have been changed and things have been misconstrued from, you know, original sources of wisdom, is because society has been built with the idea that you can be healed from the outside in, that everything around you is all you need to be happy, healthy, and safe. And, you know, we sincerely have forgotten the truth that you can't be as happy as you want, you can't be as healthy as you want no matter what you do if you don't, to some degree, work from the inside out. And that is what they're all about in Christspiracy, you know, coming from a perspective of love and compassion that you feel inside to then influence your actions in the outside world, and thus your own self, because then you feel the influence of compassion and love so much more. They spoke of a Buddhist monk who meditated on compassion and love, and
he was also vegan.
Yeah, he was also vegan, and they said that he had the highest gamma brainwaves recorded in any human when he did that, and that's largely due because he had been doing it for so many years. But that's the kind of quality of life that you want to be living. Why wouldn't you want to live that quality of life?
And because gamma brainwaves, they said in the documentary, that's what's closely connected to like consciousness, empathy, and yeah, for our ability to be empathetic is is a large part of our human experience, and it's insane that we're so disconnected from it, and that it's seen as weakness rather than the strength that it is.
And that's one thing I feel like they did a pretty good job. They're trying to help us understand the connections and that we are interconnected, and that animals are connected to human beings, and human beings have connections to animals. And whether that means you have pets like cats and dogs, or birds and hamsters, and you take care of those pets and take care of them, what's the difference between taking care of your pets and then not worrying about animals like cows and chickens and pigs, that are giving us food, but they still need a sense of care. They need to be taken care of, and they shouldn't just be crammed into small spaces and have conditions that are deplorable that no human could even endure. Yeah. And then they interviewed this guy that his family and a lot of his, the people that in his family line had been part of the Holocaust in Auschwitz, and that he started realizing how animals were being treated was how they treated the Jews during the Holocaust. So it's, to him, this slaughter of animals was like another Holocaust.
Yeah, and when you were talking about the conditions of the animals being conditions that no human would have the ability to endure, it made me think about even the way we treat sea life, and their spectacles when we want them to be. We have SeaWorld and different arenas to watch them, but right when the money flow isn't there, that arena is abandoned, and then the animal is left in the dirty water tank, and they don't use the money to either rehabilitate it or set it free or anything. And people have taken drones over different SeaWorld parks, and there are like abandoned sea life in arenas that aren't used anymore. And imagine being in a padded white room for years on end, and no friends, no connection, not even a connection to your captor anymore. No human can endure that.
It's so, if you just take some time to think about it, from the basis of understanding that mammals in some way are alike, and mammals are some way alike in the way we feel emotion, the way all of life really has emotion. But I think among us as humans looking at mammals, I think it's the closest we get to looking, well, not even the closest we get, but maybe it's just something I've been thinking of. Something I've been thinking of lately is how relatable mammals are to us, because obviously we are mammals,
Yeah.
And so I can really put myself in the shoes of other mammals who live on Earth, because I myself am one, and I think it helps me have so much more empathy for life itself when I think of mammals and the way they're treated in many places around the world.
Yeah, and so how this documentary is called Christspiracy, Brigham had told me he also watched Seaspiracy, which I know one of the producers or directors that worked on Christspiracy also worked on Seaspiracy, and more of what Vanessa was saying about the sea animals and everything. Probably you can get more information, from Seaspiracy, so that might be another one to watch as well.
Yeah, and that's another rabbit hole that will take you as far and as long as Christspiracy will.
But even those are connected. They're both about the treatment of animals and society's apathy towards it, which is the opposite of empathy. And our humans' natural inclination is toward empathy, closer to the beginning of the episode of our podcast, my mom was talking about a child crying when she found out that they were eating animals. And it's always funny for adults until it becomes inconvenient and they just want their child to eat. And so they either, unfortunately might get angry, or they'll just encourage their child to let go of that piece of their humanity and empathy because it's inconvenient. And losing ourselves isn't worth the inconvenience of others, especially when in doing that, these past 2,000 years has led us where we are, and now we're kind of collectively ignoring global warming.
Yeah, and just get ready to be rattled again and again, because you're rattled once a little bit, while watching this documentary. You're motivated to take another step, and each time you're motivated to take another step towards becoming your best self, you are moving away from processes and norms that once gave you a sense of security. But those ones can fall away tomorrow. Those ones can be non-existent tomorrow. So creating sense of security and trust, it always goes back to working from the inside out.
And there's nothing wrong if, like with that little girl, why does it have to be a battle? Why can't she just eat all the vegetables that she wants, or other types of foods? Why does she have to be encouraged to eat meat? That meat is healthy, and that should be kind of her choice. I mean, she's young enough. She can, there's other foods out there for her to eat.
Yeah. We should encourage diversity more, because that's where the beauty lies on Earth.
And not even just encourage, but Vanessa had said that she was more connected, being a young, beautiful child, she's more connected with herself than we are, because we've forgotten it, because we were taught to do what,
or conditioned.
Yeah, conditioned. Yeah. To do what she did. Oh, it's okay. We have to eat these animals.
It's not that big a deal.
Yeah, it's not that big. But in reality, she knows she's going against something. She doesn't know what it is or how big it is. She just knows that cows are nice, chickens are nice, pigs are nice. That's what she said. That's literally the quote.
Yeah.
And she doesn't want to eat them. So, if we can help children to retain even a small portion of their connectedness. Yes, connected.
Connectedness.
Yes. So,
Yeah.
I'm not going to try to say it again, but yeah, just a small portion of that, like that makes the world a better place. Because a lot of the traits that you see in children that you think are annoying now are actually traits that when they become older, those are the traits they now want an adult to possess.
Yeah.
Like, children can't be driven, but it's okay for an adult to be driven, to have the biggest company, to, have success, have money, and do all this stuff. But yet when a child or a student, between the ages of, kindergarten through 18 years shows any type of drive, or they want to do something different against the norm, they're like immediately punished.
Yeah.
And it's just not fair. It's not right. And you have to be very careful with upbringing of children, that you don't squelch or make something that's important to them seem less important, because usually those are the traits that they're going to need when they become an adult, and that many adults are praised for possessing, having.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that reminds me. They said in speaking of role models, they said in the documentary, go ahead and Google search famous vegetarians or famous vegans. People like Albert Einstein and Leonardo da Vinci were vegetarian, and these are the people we're taught to model after because of their amazing achievements towards science. I guess those are just science and art, but like,
Oh yeah, art.
more than that, more than science and art.
Innovation.
Well, Tesla was one that they had mentioned
Electricity.
with electricity, and a lot of people say that Thomas Edison was, the electrician man or developed electricity.
Mhm.
He was just a small portion of it. It came more from Nikolai Tesla, and it was more his idea. And Tesla didn't want to make it so that people made money off electricity. He felt like it should be given freely and a human right, but he didn't win that battle in the end. And as we know, we all pay for some sort of electricity,
Just as the lives of animals should be their right, but it's instead a commodity for money. So
Mhm.
it's all connected.
Yeah, I guess back to the point I was trying to make. If I were to write a book called How to Be a Human Being, I would draw upon Nikola Tesla, Leonardo da Vinci, and Einstein, and I would detail some of their lifestyle habits because, for example, Da Vinci would go into the markets and buy chickens and take them out to the woods and just release them. You know, that's the kind of love and compassion that we really, really need today.
Yeah, and you can get into like chain of commerce or whatever, how he's actually like buying the thing, but like besides that, at least he's still putting money towards the individual getting their payment and still releasing all those lives of the chickens, like that one kind of fable about a child throwing sea stars back into the ocean, and then an adult comes along and is like, you can't save them all, and then the child's like, well, that's all right, I've already saved a few. That's just like them being able to rescue the one lamb from an entire, I think it was like 900 animals.
They said it was in the millions. It was like 1.2 million animals slaughtered that day at one event, one, ritual. I don't want to say ritualistic, but tradition. It was certainly a tradition. It was a tradition of theirs to go to this event where millions of animals were slaughtered.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any closing remarks?
Just, it's always good to have an open mind and to learn new things, and especially when you're watching a documentary. And sometimes it helps to take notes or see what really strikes you, what you could, there are a few people that I wrote down, like their names, and they wrote certain books. So I want to go back and maybe look up some of those books, read some of those books, like, however you watch documentaries best. If you just need to watch it once without worrying about anything and just try to listen to the whole thing, that might work for you. But it's, always good to just see what you've learned from it, from watching a documentary like this. Mm-hmm.
Do you have any closing remarks?
I'm really, really glad and grateful that there are people willing to risk a whole lot for the greater good, and that can't be overlooked. Their sacrifice and everything like that. And I hope to some extent pattern my own life after their example.
Yeah. Yeah. My closing remark will be to stay curious rather than go towards judgment, because once we make a judgment, we typically stop thinking. And so stay curious and don't be afraid to realize the interconnectedness of everything, because it'll help you feel less lonely. All right. Yeah, thanks for joining us on Hua, I Don't Know, on this special guest episode. Brigham, my brother. Julie, my mother.